Hi. So I'm your associate minister. I'm Reverend Ben Jamison, and I've spent the last 5 months learning everybody's name based on your mask, so I have to start all over. So if you could hold me in the hands of grace by not remembering your name again after 5 months, I'd really appreciate that extra grace as I get to know you from your whole face. Here at Centers for Spiritual Living, we have 7 core values that we use to guide everything that we do. Those core values are love, healing, oneness, abundance, spiritual growth, service, and diversity. Today we're focusing on healing. In the background of spiritual psychology that I have, we define healing as the application of loving to the places inside that are hurt or afraid. Love, then, that unconditional presence of love that is our true nature, is the most powerful force for healing in our lives. And yet, sometimes it seems like there's not enough love, right? The wounding that we can have in our consciousness can be so deep that look as hard as we can, we just can't seem to find enough love to heal. Well, the mystical poet Rumi reminds us that yours is not to seek for love. Yours is to seek and find all the barriers that you have built against it. My friends, those barriers are judgments, and we dissolve them through forgiveness. You see, if you look deeply at any wounding you may have in your consciousness, you'll find wrapped up in there some judgment, a misbelief, a false interpretation of reality. And to the degree that we are able to forgive and clear those, dissolving the barriers to our natural loving essence, that love will flow back into our experience, uplifting and healing. There's a lot of misunderstanding in society around forgiveness. So for now, simply know this. There is nothing that is too big to forgive, and you are the power. You are the power of forgiveness. You are the power of love, and you are the power of healing in your own life. And so to you, and all of the power that you are, I say namaste, and have a great Sunday. So we are looking at the book of the month, You Are the Power, by Dr. Kennedy Schultz. And in this book, he spends a lot of time and a lot of effort taking traditional biblical verses and updating them into a modern metaphysical language. And he does this with the intention of taking the power of these divine ideas out of the Bible, out of traditional religion, and putting it back where it belongs, with you and with me. Hence, you are the power. And so as we continue that exploration today, and it just so happens to be the 23rd day of the month, why not look at the 23rd Psalm? This was actually a complete accident. There was no intentionality behind the 23rd day of the month being the 23rd Psalm, but we're going to explore that today and how we can look at it from a metaphysical viewpoint. Now, just like with the 10 Commandments when I was speaking to you last time, the 23rd Psalm is something that is so ingrained in our consciousness that you know it even if you don't know you know it. At least you know pieces of it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemies, right? These big ideas are present everywhere in our consciousness. They're in the world, they come up against us frequently. So again, it's good to look at how we can extract the power from those and reword it in a way that works for us. But what we tend to do with metaphysical reinterpretations of the Bible or of other spiritual documents is to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't stop to acknowledge all the good that has been done by these ideas as they have been presented. And when it comes to the 23rd Psalm, for thousands of years, countless people have found solace and peace and spiritual support in a time of great tragedy, in a time of health crisis and death of loved ones, using this particular prayer. And that's really what it is. It is an affirmative prayer using very poetic language. And so before we look at tearing it apart to rebuild it in a way that works for us, if we acknowledge all of that good comes with us and becomes the foundation upon which we can have even more good in our lives as we rework this prayer so that it's something we can use all the time, not just at a funeral. So I really want to celebrate whoever it was that wrote the 23rd Psalm and did so much good in the lives of so many as we now take it forward in a new way. So here's the thing about the 23rd Psalm, about any poem really, or any symbol. You see, poetry is full of symbolic language, and we often forget that we get to choose the meaning that symbols carry for us. Many, many years ago, I lived in Los Angeles, and I would drive over the hill every day from the valley to the west side for work, and then commute back over the hill again. And at the very top of that hill was a giant white cross. Now, this was at a time in my life when I was not very good at reinterpreting traditional religion in a way that worked for me, and when I didn't realize that I could pick my own meaning for symbols, so I would get triggered every single time I went to work and every single time I drove home. At the time, I perceived that cross as a symbol of hypocrisy and of harm that had been done to so many people. Not from the divine ideas that Christianity is based on, but from the way that some people have taken and abused those ideas. Luckily, I had a teacher who reminded me that I get to pick the meaning I have behind symbols, and he said, well, what if instead the cross is simply a roadmap to ascension? The center pillar of the cross is a direction. It indicates up. As we continually do our work in consciousness growth, we rise. And at some point in that growth, in that ascension process, we'll hit the field of polarities, that crossbar on the cross. The field of polarities, good, bad, right, wrong. That's here, friends. That's this world. There's polarity here everywhere. And so at some point in our ascension, we will hit the field of polarities, and to the degree that we nail ourselves to ideas of good, bad, right, and wrong, we will get stuck, right? But if we stay in our heart, if we remain loving in that middle course way, we can transcend the field of polarities easier and more gracefully and continue on our growth. It became something that triggered me every day to a symbol that reminded me to be centered in my heart and to let go of my attachment to good, bad, right, and wrong to the best of my ability. It's the exact same symbol, but such a different meaning brought different power to it in my life. So when it comes to poetic language, remember, the symbol is not the thing it symbolizes. Don't get caught in the symbol and miss the power that it's pointing to. So when we look at reinterpreting the 23rd Psalm, we could go line by line if I took like 4 weeks to do it. But if you're really interested in that depth of work on this, get the book, You Are the Power. It's out of print, but you can find it on Amazon used. Kennedy Schultz goes line by line and does a great job of bringing every bit of this prayer up into a modern metaphysical understanding. We're just going to look at 3 bits. But those 3 bits are going to change the entire thing. So let's start at the very beginning. I hear that's a very good place to start. The Lord. The Lord is the very beginning of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. What ideas, what images are conjured up for you when we hear the Lord in relation to spirituality? Typically, it's this external power, this external deity who has set up very strict and stringent laws and is watching very closely to make sure that I follow those laws so that if I don't, I can be punished. Anybody with me there on that interpretation of the Lord? So that then colors this entire prayer from the beginning, but what if we looked at it more metaphysically? There's a lot of ways we can do that. We can contemplate in our own consciousness, how could I look at this in a way that would be more empowering for me? That introspection is a really powerful tool. Or we can look at the work that other people have done and see how well it fits for us. So I went to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. This is a thing. It's about this thick, written by Charles Fillmore, who co-founded Unity, which is a very similar path. And he says this about how we would define the Lord. He says, in the Old Testament, Jehovah, in the New Testament, Christ is referred to as Lord. Jehovah and Christ both represent spiritual man. Now, let's stop there real quick, because what we find in the Bible and in all of the old writings that New Thought comes out of is this preponderance of the gender-specific pronoun towards men. That's not what that's referring to. Spiritual man in this context has nothing to do with sex, and so we need to be skilled at being able to replace those ideas immediately as we're going through the reading. What he's meaning there is our spiritual nature, right? The Christ consciousness that I am, the Buddha nature that I have, that high self, that spark of divinity. That's what's being referred to here by spiritual man. So knowing that, let's go back and look at this redefinition again. In the Old Testament, Jehovah, in the New Testament, Christ is referred to as Lord. Jehovah and Christ both represent my divine nature. Lord, then, is another name for my high self. It represents one of the aspects of my being. You note that what I said and what's written are very different, right? Because I translated on the fly, right? Got rid of all of those gender-based pronouns in the moment and replaced it with my new understanding of the word Lord. And so what we get from this is not just Lord, but anytime we see Lord, Jehovah, or Christ listed in any spiritual context, we can now automatically replace that with the Christ nature of my being, with the loving that beats my heart, right? Whatever terminology it is that works for you, and it becomes instantly personified and something that guides who we are. So instead of the Lord, this external deity that punishes me if I do wrong, is my shepherd, making sure that I always do right, we have the divine presence within me, guides, guards, directs, and protects me in all ways and all ways. Very different experience of this prayer. And then after that, we get all the he-he-he's, thou, thou, thous. He leadeth me beside this, he causeth me to do that, thou art with me, thou, thou, thou. The he's and the thous all refer back to the Lord at the very beginning, right? So now, anytime we see one of those words in the 23rd Psalm, it again becomes, my Christ nature leadeth me beside still waters. The divine essence of who and what I am is with me, right? It all of a sudden becomes something that is personal to me. Now, we like to talk a lot in New Thought about your Christ consciousness, your high self, right? And we tend to sort of leave that be, saying that, you do enough treatment work and enough affirmations and enough meditation, and eventually you'll find your Christ presence and you'll just be living as the Christ. But we don't often give a whole lot of rubber meets the road type of practices to help find out what that is in our daily experience. So let's look at one of those to make sure we've got something we can do. There's a wonderful spiritual teacher out in the world right now named Muji, and he says this. He says, the seer must be present for the seen to appear. Pretty basic when you think about it. If there's nobody to see a thing, that thing can't appear because there's nobody to see it. Well, when we look at this idea of our high self, in relation to this quote, our high self is the seer. And so that high self, that Christ consciousness, must be present in order for anything to be seen. That means that I can take into introspection, into self-reflection, every bit of my experience and ask myself the question, is this the seer or is this that which is seen? I can look at my body, I can see this physical body. So clearly the physical body is not me. It is the thing that is seen, not that consciousness which is seeing. If I'm in an experience of upset or overwhelm, clearly that is not me, because I am not the experience of upset and overwhelm. I'm the one observing the experience of upset and overwhelm. I'm not the thoughts that I think. I am the one observing those thoughts being thought. And so as I do this exploration, I can set down anything that I might have once identified with that I know is not the true nature of myself, because it is something I can describe. And as I do that, more and more, unidentifying with these false ideas about myself as body and everything that goes along with the body's aging and all of that other mumbo-jumbo that society likes to buy into, I come back into what's left is my divine nature. As we practice this more and more, we can get to the place where the Lord, as represented here, is truly what guides me in all ways and all ways. So with that, we know this prayer is all about us, calling us forward into a practice of stepping into our divine nature. What about that valley of the shadow of death piece? This is the piece in this prayer, perhaps the most famous line in it, that causes society to use it so often at funerals. So what does it mean? Lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Well, the thou refers to the Christ consciousness, to that high self, the love that beats my heart. So that love is with me. And what we know about the universe is that the universe is the presence and power of unlimited love, and God is all there is. So if God is all there is, if love is all there is, and love is with me, then in the presence of that love there can be no evil, so there is nothing for me to fear. That gets rid of the fear part. The valley of the shadow of death. Let's look at what that conjures up in our consciousness. What do you think about when you hear the valley of the shadow of death? Cold, dark, bleak, mountainous, craggy, evil, right? Very scary stuff. It's the valley of the shadow of death. We're so focused on the death part that we forgot it's a valley. And when we look at symbolic language in all of poetry and all of human history, valleys symbolize what? Abundance, peace, rest, glorious, gorgeous nature, right? Where is this valley? It's the valley of the shadow of death. You remember that thing about the cross, the field of polarity, good, bad, right, wrong, life, death? That's a polarity. This is the valley, friends. We are in the valley of the shadow of death right now. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that beach over there is dark and scary and craggy and hard and awful at all. I think it's pretty beautiful. I think the sky is beautiful. The fruit on the trees is amazing. This valley is amazing and wonderful. We just got so caught up in the death part. We missed it. We got so caught up in the death part, we missed that it's not the valley of death. It's the valley of the shadow of death. Death is an appearance. It's not the reality of who we are. Think about it. What dies? The body. The body dies. Am I the body? No, I'm the one seeing the body. I'm the consciousness observing the body. I'm the consciousness watching death happen. But as a divine spark, as the presence and power of spirit, as the entire ocean in a drop, or all of creation in the limited use of consciousness that I make of it, the seemingly limited use of consciousness that I make of it, because as soon as I step back into my Christ self, by letting go of all of the false identifications that I have, my presence of my divinity becomes unlimited. That peace never dies. Spirit has never been born. It never dies. It is birthless, deathless, and changeless. And so too is that divine nature of who and what I am. So when I remember that love is all there is, so there's no evil to fear, and that I'm in a valley, and it's a beautiful valley, and it's a valley that reminds me that there are polarities like life and death and good and bad and right and wrong, but that I'm the one who's observing those things, not overcome by them, then I have the opportunity to enjoy the valley and enjoy all of the rest of creation that is here with me in this beautiful valley. Very different reminder of what life is than what we're used to. One of the most confusing parts of this prayer is that piece about the table and the presence of mine enemies, right? I mean, we're doing good so far, right? This is all about my Christ self. It guides me. It leads me. I can forget about all of my fear and worry because here I am in this beautiful valley and I know that the divine essence of me is eternal. But who are all of these enemies and what loving God would put me at a table with them? I'm not going to be able to eat or drink anything. I'm going to have to check for poison on all of it, right? You ever heard the phrase or said the phrase, I'm my own worst enemy? We could get rid of that worst word and add an ly and say, I'm my only enemy. Think about it. We're in this beautiful, wonderful valley, right? Love is our nature. Love is the nature of everybody. We have hundreds of expressions of spirit expressing in this room and online, connected in such a way that we get to understand and explore our divinity. How amazing and wonderful is that? And yet, I don't experience it that way all the time. I am my own worst enemy because the way I relate to the world separates me from the good that is available to me. My enemies are my judgments. My enemies are my false beliefs. My enemies are my false identifications. And if I get to sit down at a table with all of my judgments, with all of my misunderstandings, and break bread with them, get to have a meal, what's likely to happen is that I may come to understand those aspects of myself deeper. I may come to see that there's some hurt there that needs a little love, that there's some judgment there that needs some forgiveness. I might come to understand that these false identifications were intended to keep me safe. And instead of resisting or finding anger and judgment, find compassion and love. And as I dine with my false beliefs, as I break bread with the enemies that I have unintentionally created in my own consciousness, they dissolve and become part of the magnificence of who I am in this beautiful valley where all there is that Christ presence. And then surely goodness will follow me all the days of my life. See the power behind taking ownership of these spiritual ideas, taking them out of the traditions that have interpreted them the way they have, and finding a way to make it powerful and present for you. Now, last time when I spoke on the 10 Commandments, I wasn't able to go through all 10, and I didn't want to leave you wanting today by not going line by line and completely replacing the 23rd Psalm. So instead, what I'm going to do is turn to Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes wrote a wonderful poem, another symbolic affirmative prayer, that he starts the Science of Mind textbook with. It's called Peace Be Unto Thee, Stranger. It was originally written in the context of Spirit speaking to the prodigal son as the prodigal son turned toward home. We can also interpret this as being written from that Christ consciousness to that aspect of ourself that doesn't quite yet understand our own divinity. We could also read it from the perspective of CSL Fort Lauderdale, to everybody who has yet to discover that this is their spiritual home. And so I want to leave you today with this amazing affirmative prayer. Peace be unto thee, stranger. Enter and be not afraid. I have left the door open and thou art welcome to my home. There is room in my house for all. I have swept the hearth and lighted the fire. The room is warm and cheerful, and you will find comfort and rest within. The table is laid, and the fruits of life are spread before thee. The wine is here also. It sparkles in the light. I have set a chair for you where the sunbeams dance through the shade. Sit and rest and refresh your soul. Eat of the fruit and drink of the wine. All is yours, and you are welcome. Namaste. We have an opportunity to engage now in spiritual practice together, in accessing that divine presence, that Christ presence, and setting aside any identification with that which is not our divine self, and finding rest and warmth within. So I invite you to allow your eyes to close and allow the music to turn your attention within and to center.
I breathe out, I breathe in, I am still, I go within. When I quiet my mind, in the stillness I find. Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there.
And so focusing on that centered space, on that spark of light, that unconditional loving presence that heals, that is our true nature. And recognizing that light as the fire lighted in the hearth, keeping the room warm and comforting and inviting. That room, of course, being our own consciousness, our divine self, the seer that sees, the knower that knows, the lover that loves unconditionally all the time. That is who and what we are. And as we step back into that, as we fall back into the underlying arms of Spirit, setting aside our belief that we are the body, that we are our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, our emotions, our memories, setting all of that aside, we are left with only love and sunbeams dancing through the shade. And so in this love, in this presence, let's sit a moment in the silence to rest and refresh our souls. Taking a deep breath, letting it out with a sigh. We come to know that all is ours. All the love, all the joy, all the beauty, all the connection, all the possibility and energy and ideas and magnificence of life is ours. And we are most welcome to it. As we breathe it in, claiming this truth about ourselves, we know that the life of all life goes with us, saying, yes, beloved, this good and that good and this good and that good, and all good is yours for the highest good, and what a delight is that. Enjoy the valley, my beloved. And though we have set aside identification with the body as who we are, we may begin to become aware of it again. But keep our knowing that it is not who we are, as we allow those eyes to open and be here now.
I breathe out, I breathe in, I am still, I go within, when I quiet my mind, in the stillness I find, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there.
You all have an affirmation card on your chair. We like to close out with an affirmation and a prayer, so let's say that affirmation together. I fear no evil, because none exists in a universe of love. And so turning our attention within to that place where that love exists, that entire universe of love existing in the core of my being, I know that there is only one perfect life. That as this life lives me and lives you and lives everybody I come in contact with, the only thing anywhere is spirit, meeting spirit to know spirit more as who and what I am. And so knowing this love goes with me, knowing the power of universal creative capacity goes with me into this week to guide, guard, direct, and protect me in all that I say, think, feel, and do, ensuring the highest good of all concerned, because the Lord of my life is the light and the love that beats my heart, and it is with me always. I know good and more good is mine. And in the celebration of this good, in the affirmation of this good, in the saying, yes, thank you, more please to this good and all the good on its way to me now, I unleash this word into the creative law that birthed the entire universe, knowing that it is done, and so it is. Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure you like and share on Facebook, and come back next week, 10:30 for service, 10 o'clock meditation. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you for watching, and thanks for supporting CSL. If you'd like to know more about us, check us out on our website or social media. Blessings.